Well, welcome back to the channel, and I'd just like to start this video by saying I've basically done nothing to this project since my last video showing off the center cap restoration on the wheels. My wife and I just welcomed a new little girl to the family, and while things have been great, they've also been hectic, and there's definitely no time left over to work on the Civic. I'm partly making this video to hold myself accountable on finishing this project and trying to jumpstart some motivation to dive back in. So let's do a quick recap of how we got here, since it's been almost 2 years since I bought this car. First of all, I had to find it. No one responded to my messages on Craigslist, so I had to do some detective work and locate the car using sophisticated satellite imagery. Luckily, the seller was trying to get rid of the car, and I soon had it home and all of its dirty, dirty glory. Then I had to get it running. The previous owner tried doing some of the work themselves and had the timing installed 180 degrees off. I also discovered after much debugging that the ECU was fried, so I sent it off to have all the capacitors replaced. Once the car was running, there were some obvious coolant leaks, in addition to the heater core being disconnected and it generally just being a mess. To start restoring the engine bay, I pulled the motor and transmission to give them an inspection and a refresh. The motor got new oil seals, timing belt, thermostat, head gasket, head studs, and all new vacuum lines. The injectors were also thoroughly cleaned. The transmission received a new main seal, flywheel, clutch, and throwout bearing. After a couple of coats of paint, the valve cover was restored back to a factory-looking finish. Then, the engine bay was stripped, cleaned, and prepped for paint. I did a 3-part process of sealer primer, base coat, and clear coat, restoring the factory frost white finish under the hood. With the engine bay painted, I turned my attention to the subframe and suspension. I refreshed the undercoating in the wheel wells and replaced every worn rubber suspension bushing with a polyurethane bushing from Energy Suspension. I reinstalled the subframe with some restored junkyard components off of a '94 Acura Integra. One of the most complicated parts of this restoration was the HVAC system. After I discovered the evidence of mice living in the AC blower, I knew I had to dig deep to clean this up. All of the plastic HVAC cases were stripped and washed. I installed a new evaporator core and expansion valve. I installed a new heater core and heater valve in the firewall, along with new seals on the mating surfaces of all the press-fit HVAC components. With that out of the way, it was time to get the engine back into the car. I reinstalled the wiring harnesses, rebuilt the steering rack, and put the engine back in with some new Hasport billet motor mounts. I took a break from the engine bay to throw on some max speeding rod coilovers and install all the restored suspension parts. From there, it was relatively plug and play for the engine bay assembly. Lots of making sure things ended up back in their correct location in the correct order. I often referred back to my previous videos to double check my work and make sure things were going back where they should be. For the rear suspension, I opted to do a rear disc brake conversion using some of the junkyard parts I scored off of that '94 Integra. Everything per usual has to be stripped, cleaned, upgraded, painted, and replaced. Along the way, you keep telling yourself it's gonna be worth it in the end. After lots of hemming and hawing over what direction to go with the dash and interior, I decided to keep the original CX dash and paint it black for what will eventually be a full black interior swap from an SI Civic. I painted my blue CX dash black and harvested all the best parts of the dash controls and covers to try to make an idealized setup. After the dash was installed, it was just a few odds and ends that needed to be buttoned up before fluids went in and it was running again. I next turned my attention to my plan for the wheels. Earlier in the year, I had purchased some 9091 CRX SI wheels because I thought they would look good on the EG. Yes, I know, personal preference. I had them sandblasted so I could paint them silver and clear coat on top of that. Then there was the saga of the center caps and how to treat the H logo differently. After several failed attempts to paint the logos, I ended up 3D printing an insert for the H that I glued in place before going over them with clear. I put the wheels back on with some 1-inch wheel spacers to give the stock wheel a wider presence, and I think they turned out great. And that pretty much brings us back up to present date. I have interior components on deck ready to go back into the car, but they still need restored and cleaned and painted. These are the parts out of the black Civic Si interior. In the meantime, I've kept the EG parked in the driveway and I've been using it to run errands pretty much every day. I've been trying to put miles on it and just kind of shake down since the car was pretty much completely apart at one point with the suspension and engine being out. So far, everything seems to be working great. I haven't charged up the AC system yet, and I did notice that the speedometer is doing something crazy. Sometimes it'll read the correct speed. Sometimes the needle on the speedometer will flip all the way around, and sometimes it won't work at all. So if anyone knows if that's a common problem, hit me up in the comments below. But otherwise, I need to do a little bit of research and figure out what's going on there. And like I said at the beginning of the video, with a newborn baby joining the family, there hasn't really been much time for recreational endeavors. To try to outsource the paint and bodywork, I took the car to Mako for a quote. And to my surprise, their quote for the base coat and clear coat paint job was $6,100. And this is after a couple of friendly discounts. So that was about twice what I was expecting it to be. All the bodywork, when added up, was quite a bit more than I realized. And at this stage, I'm not willing to invest that kind of money into this daily driver project. So I'm going to try and find some time to learn how to do the bodywork myself. I did, in fact, already enlist the help of a paintless dent removal professional, I guess. They were trying to pull out some of these dents and recreate this fender line for me, which was pretty dinged up. So with them knowing that I was going to do my own body work, they did do their best to try to restore this with some tools and some experience that I don't have. And on the left side rear fender, you may not remember, but there was a significant crease down the length of this fender that they were able to pull out pretty well and try to restore this fender line for me. So I think my plan is just to start tackling this piece by piece, sanding it down, working on the body work, and prepping everything until I can get a chance to figure out how I'm going to paint this whole car in my garage. Again, as always, thanks for watching, and I do hope to post more progress videos starting the body work and eventually getting to the paint work on this project in the near future. Thanks for watching.